Welcome to the Artemis Fowl discussion.
Welcome to Broscast episode 6000.
I like that this isn't Broscast at all.
No.
It's not even close to Broscast.
It's also episode like 17.
Something like that. But these people are here for some Artemis Fowl.
Next week, This is America.
Do you know anything about Artemis Fowl?
Yep. There's...
Have you read it?
Fairies.
Sorry, was that a bad question?
There's gnomes. There's a guy that can unhinge his jaw and eat the ground and poop it out.
Yeah.
Dwarves.
Yeah,
okay.
he's a dwarf.
Good for him.
Okay, well, I'm glad that you know those parts so that that's already out of the way.
Well, also, like, Artemis is, like, way too smart. Like, he comes up with,
Yeah.
like, the concept for a time machine in elementary school or high school or something.
That's in a different book, so spoilers.
Oh.
No, I'm kidding. He might. I actually don't remember much after the first book.
Well, I'm pretty sure
It's
he,
been
like,
a long time.
his teacher is talking about history, and he's like, I don't think that's true. And then he's like, I'll take the class back in time and show you all.
Sounds like a Magic
But it's
School
like-
Bus episode.
It would go down like that time-traveling movie with Gerard Butler, where like they go to England, and the one guy's like, oh, I'm Richard. And they're like, oh, Frenchman. And they just stab him to death immediately. It's like, oh, yeah, you forgot where you fucking were, you time-traveling morons.
I forgot about that movie. What was that called? The Time Travel? No.
It was, I don't know.
It was bad.
It was
I remember
dumb.
that. Yeah.
It was dumb.
But I do remember our favorite scene was that there's this huge volley of arrows.
Yeah.
And two of the arrows, like the first two, hit each other in midair.
Oh, god damn it.
It's the silliest shit that we remember.
I remember that.
Yeah. So Artemis, yes, is a brilliant criminal mastermind.
Criminal.
Yes,
I don't
from
remember that.
a family whose lineage is in criminal activities. So the Fowls, ironically, this book has a lot of that type of... It has that type of stuff in it where the word foul, meaning bad or whatever, derives from this family name. Because they've been around for hundreds of years being foul people, being really shitty criminals.
Kind of like when someone says he's very noble.
There you go, coming from... Yeah, okay. And he's 12. So he's... I mean, 12, you're in grade 7? Something like that? No, 7 or 8?
I think you had 9, don't you? Or you
had
had
5, yeah. So you'd be in 7 or 8. And
9, Jesus.
so clearly he's super young. And this is probably the one thing that bothers me the most. His bodyguard, his name is Butler. Like, that's the family name. And then the idea is that that's where that word comes from, too.
Come on, man.
So the Butlers have served...
Oh, yeah. I've been sitting on this chair, which we also fucking invented because we're rich and
Well, the Fowls and the Butlers have been joined families the whole time. The Butlers train so that they can serve the Fowls.
And the guy that works in their car is Dr. Mechanic.
Yeah, exactly.
Doctor.
There's a lot of that because
he has an advanced PhD.
This book is not designed for adults in a lot of ways.
For kids?
It really is more of a kid's book. There's a lot of silly prefaces in it, but I avoided most of those. I'm looking for the core story, which I thought was pretty cool still.
So you're censoring it.
No, I'm omitting things. An omission is not a lie. So Butler is his bodyguard, and he's really massive and super scary. They don't actually describe his size, but you know...
he's like Dave Bautista.
Yes, probably like that size.
Like Dave Bautista when he played Odd Job.
They describe his hands as being big enough to palm a cantaloupe.
I remember that exact line.
So he's huge. He's a massive man.
I remember that. Like, wow, that was like hidden in my brain somewhere. You're bringing
Somewhere
old
deep
memories
down
out
in there. So they go at the start of the book. They go to Ho Chi Minh City, which I believe is
Really?
Saigon, right?
That's Vietnam.
Yeah.
I actually have a wealth of knowledge on this information. That's very interesting that you bring that up.
Just watched.
I just watched a documentary about this.
It was kind of funny. You told me about that documentary, and
Yeah.
then I was in the bathroom, and someone had left a magazine there, and there was an ad on the back for that very same thing.
Ho Chi Minh was
He was a person.
He was a leader, but he sort of represented the Vietnamese people. He actually had, that's not his birth name. He went by a bunch of aliases.
Well, because they were trying to find him, so
Yeah.
he had to keep changing his name.
And then he eventually landed on Ho Chi Minh.
So is that Saigon? Because I forget. They said in the book what it was, but I didn't write it down.
I think so.
I believe so.
Because Saigon was north and Hanoi was south, I think.
Okay.
I think I'm getting that wrong.
So they're in Ho Chi Minh City, and they're looking for this contact who has reached out to them. And the waiter comes over and asks them what they want, and then Artemis says, would you just sit down? Like, he knows that this waiter is actually his contact, posing as a waiter to figure them out. And he says, you're clearly not dressed like a waiter. You don't sound like a waiter. So just sit down and stop wasting my time. Like, he just shuts him down completely.
He's like a mix of the Benedict Cumberbatch's Sherlock mixed with that badass girl from Game of Thrones that's like 15 years old.
Oh, yeah.
And she's just so straight to the point. She's like tougher than most of the other characters.
Yeah, it's something Mormont. I think it might actually be Lyanna Mormont.
I don't know about that.
Either way, she is a Mormont. So they're going to find this contact because he has a line on a healer. And he says that the healer will work for rice wine. So that's her price, is you bring her alcohol and she'll heal you. And she lives in Ho Chi Minh City.
So she's a wealthy person? Because she doesn't need money anymore?
Well, see, that's...
Or maybe she's a poor person and alcoholism is directly related to poverty. Whoa! Did I just...
You just read way too much into that. So they force this contact to take them to the ferry. And, sorry, I said too much.
Oh, no! Restart the podcast. All right, welcome back to Broscast episode 6001.
So they make this guy take them to this healer. And Artemis says to him, you can run if you like, but expect a sharp and fatal pain between your shoulder blades.
I remember that line exactly.
It's a very specific threat.
Wow.
And he constantly refers to Butler when talking to people because he basically is saying, you can either do what we want or Butler can kill you. He does that all the time. So
like the runner-up line would be, you can do what I want or I'll have Butler break your neck so you can watch your back.
Ah, that's a good one. So they're walking through the streets of Ho Chi Minh City, which is obviously a very dense place. And someone tries to pickpocket Butler, so he breaks the guy's hand. He breaks all of the fingers on the guy's hand as a
individually.
Probably all at once.
Oh.
And he does it as a sign of force. Right. It's a show of force just to deter anybody else from doing it. They get to this healer's den that this guy. So you'll like this. This guy, the contact, his name is Nguyen, like Nguyen.
I actually I would have found that funny, but I found it less funny because I watched BoJack Horseman, and one of the characters' names is Nguyen.
Yeah.
And like every single character is like, how do I pronounce this?
Yeah. So they go to this healer, and the healer demands wine before she will even talk to Artemis. And so he gives her whiskey, which for some reason she was happy with. It was weird. She kept saying wine. He kept giving her whiskey, but she seemed okay with it. My guess is she just wanted to get boozed, whatever booze you had. And he sees her hand as she grabs it. She reaches sort of out of the darkness, and he can see their hand is green, like noticeably green. And they pay the contact because he's satisfied that he's found the healer that he's looking for. And they pay him an exceptional amount of money. It's like $30,000 or something like that, just to show them to where the ferry is. And he then offers her...
Is it American money?
No, pounds, because they're
pounds.
They're British, so 30,000 pounds probably.
He pays pounds to a person in Vietnam?
Yeah.
Really?
Well, it doesn't really matter, right? Like I guess he could convert it into whatever their local currency is and hand it to them. But if you go to Mexico and say, "I'll pay you 10,000 US," they'll fucking take that money.
I just didn't realize
without even
that
asking.
Pounds was interesting.
Yeah, pounds
did you know
sterling.
That there was a point where the Vietnamese economy was so dependent on American soldiers that it was actually like a concern of theirs when they pulled out.
No.
Yeah.
Dude, that's dark.
It's like stuff that no one would ever buy in Vietnam.
Yeah.
You know, like Coca-Cola and baseball cards and shit like that.
Oh man, because it was on for so long. Yeah, you build up
It was a 10-year war and a 30-year engagement.
Yeah, so you build up a serious dependence on that money. Yeah. That's crazy. So he offers this ferry a choice. He says, I will give you in exchange for your book. He clearly knows she has a book. And he says, in exchange for letting me look at your book for 30 minutes, I'll save your life. She says, what do you mean? He says, well, that wine you just drank was filled with holy water, which supposedly is bad for fairies. So he says, I'll offer you something that will cure you from the holy water, and I'll also offer you something else that will help cure you from the alcoholism. Because fairies, very much like humans, they decay when they drink too much alcohol. Like, it's hard on their systems. So that's the deal. He says, you give me your book for 30 minutes, and I'll save your life. And reluctantly, the fairy agrees to do it. So they take the book, which is tiny. I imagine it as being like one of those little Lord of the Rings guidebooks. One of those little 3-inch by 3-inch books.
I do, actually.
Yeah. And so they flip through all the pages and just photograph them and email them.
It's like fairy size, though, isn't it?
Yeah, well, exactly.
So it's a tiny book, but it's actually a regular book to fairies?
Fairies aren't that small.
Oh.
But what I thought it was going to do is get bigger, like when a fairy grabs
that
it.
would have been cool.
Because that's what happens in The Sorcerer's Apprentice. He has this little tiny book, and then he starts unfolding it, and it just keeps getting bigger and bigger and bigger until it like becomes this massive tome. And they just leave the fairy when they give it the cures. They don't wait around to see what happens, so it's just left up to your imagination whether the fairy makes it. But ultimately, he got what he wanted. He got the book. And this was his 6th attempt to do this. So he's been to 5 other... this is his 7th attempt. He failed 6 other times to meet supposed fairies or sprites in other countries. So he's finally done it. He doesn't say how long it's been, but you imagine at this point, he's already been on this case for a few years trying to figure this out.
He's 12 right now?
And he's 12. Yeah. He's really quite a genius. He's smarter than anybody else in the story, and he's a child. So it really is quite impressive. You can only imagine what he would be like when he grows up, becomes an adult.
He'd probably be like the bad guy on Watchmen. Like, so smart that he doesn't tell people about his plans.
Yeah, well, and actually that's exactly what it is. Later on, Butler he even tries to confront him, and he says, you know, what's going on? What's the plan? And he just says, you know, you need to trust me. And he says, all right, I do trust you. Probably. And they point out that the Butlers, since they're a lineage of trained soldiers, essentially, designed to be bodyguards for the Fowls, whenever there is not enough fowls for all the butlers that are born, they get farmed off to other people, protecting princes, political advisors, that sort of thing. So it's really weird that there is actually this crazy human crime organization going on, but you don't even hear about it in the book because the whole thing is about this like fairy crime that's happening.
Weird.
Yeah. So they choose not to kill the sprite. Butler was asking, why didn't we just kill the fairy that gave us the book? And he says, we're not going to kill that fairy because a body would lead to an investigation, which would lead back to us. However, the fairy isn't going to sell us out because they're prohibited from drinking alcohol as part of their magic. So she would be ousted by her people if they knew how she met Artemis or how she came about that.
So in their world, like, these other beings they're not secret, are they?
Yeah, they are. No one knows about fairies. No one knows about them at this point. Or any of them. Humans assume the same thing we do today, that we're alone on the planet. And he starts looking at all these ancient stories and how they all seem to line up. And the main thing that every story used to say is that all of these fairies have a sacred book. And that's why he knew that the fairy would have a book to give to him.
Right.
And it's essentially, they call it a fairy Bible, but it's not really a Bible. It's more of an operator's manual.
Well, people have started to refer to the Bible that way, where it's like, you know, like the guitar player's Bible. Like, it essentially just means a dense book with a lot of guidance in it.
But what's very silly is that a guitar player's Bible has more specific information than an actual Bible. An actual Bible has many pages that are just preface of stories that aren't specific instructions. So really, a guitar player's Bible has more information contained in it if it's the same length as the actual Bible. It's kind of a misnomer, but either way, it is sort of a Bible because it has commandments in it. Because the way fairy magic can only work under certain circumstances. So the rules are written into the book, and if you break the rules, you lose your magic, because that is how they sustain their magic, is by following these rules. So that's why every fairy must have a book.
So like the actual like magic of the world will disappear from them if they don't follow these laws?
Yeah, from their body. They can't contain the magic in their body if they
Oh.
don't follow these laws properly.
Whoa.
Yeah. And there's some heavy side effects as well. One thing is fairies are not allowed into a human dwelling. And if you attempt to enter a human dwelling while you have magic in your body, you'll actually violently vomit. Like, to the point where you can't do anything. You get completely immobilized. And while a fairy is in a human's home, they must respect the wishes of the owner of the home. So if the owner of the home says, sit there and stay still, you have to sit there and stay still. It's sort of like vampires from True Blood, but
Yeah.
more intense.
Yeah.
So the whole book is written in Gnomish, but Artemis has a plan to use modern technology to decipher it. Basically,
Gnomish.
yeah. I don't understand why it's written in Gnomish, but they're fairies. It seems like Gnomish is the only language they have, which is weird.
Oh.
I don't know why it wouldn't be fairy language, because you don't really meet many gnomes. So I don't know. Maybe gnomes were like the ancients, and the gnomes like gave birth to all the fairies and shit.
Well, the only reason why we know, like, why there are multiple languages with humans is because there was a tablet, I believe it was called the Rosetta Stone, and it had 3 different languages and 5 different writing styles or something like that.
And it was all the same words.
It's essentially the crypt. It's like the way to like. Yeah, it's essentially
It's a
like
cipher.
It's a cipher. It's the key to the first translations, which helped with every other translation. If that didn't exist, then eventually we would either not mingle, or eventually one group with one language would dominate the world until only humans spoke one language, and we'd probably call it human.
Yeah, it would be.
So maybe just the gnomes and the fairies had like a crazy war, and the gnomes won.
The gnomes took
and
over.
there's no fairy language anymore because it just got like
Maybe.
eviscerated.
So they go back to Artemis's home, and Artemis's mom, her name's Angeline. They're like A's in this family. She's been bedridden for about a year since Artemis's father disappeared.
Oh no! I was about to make a joke too about the Spill Canvas song, and that's exactly how it goes. Actually,
What?
she was bedridden when her ex-lover, their father, something.
Okay. So Artemis is kind of bittersweet about her health, because it's unfortunate to see his mom like that, but because she's bedridden, he has the run of the house. He controls everything. He controls the money. Butler is only beholden to him, and he's allowed to do all these schemes and not go to school because his mom basically has no grip on reality. So that's sort of a thing that Artemis fights with himself the whole time. And Butler has a younger sister named Juliet, and Juliet is supposed to be tending to the mom, but the mom freaks out and kicks Juliet out of her room, so Artemis has to go and calm the whole situation down. And when he goes and talks to her, she's so out of it that she says, "That new girl is horrible." And Artemis goes, I know, we'll let her go. And she says, good. And then he says, she says, send somebody else in. And he says, oh, well, Butler's sister Juliet is working for us now, so we'll send her up in a minute.
Wow.
So she's completely out of it. She has no real grasp on reality. And she actually doesn't even recognize him when he comes in the room.
Oh.
Because he says, what's going on, mother? And she gets angry at him. She says, I don't know who you are, but I'm not your mother.
Jeez.
Yeah. So imagine being 12 years old and your mom is completely not, I don't even know what word to use.
Incoherent.
But yeah, she doesn't recognize you at all, or even recognize that she knows you. So yeah, that part kind of put a damper over it. I've definitely noticed that. Yeah.
A damper over what? The story?
Yeah, it was just, it's all this like fairy excitement and stuff, and then Artemis's mom is just totally checked out.
That's usually how it goes with fantasy works. Like,
It's true. There's
like
always
the Lion,
some
Witch, and the
aspects.
Wardrobe. Like they had to leave their home and their family because of the bombings during World War II.
Oh, that's true.
In Harry Potter, he's basically a slave. He's like stuck under he's just treated like a second-class citizen.
It's true.
And Hermione, didn't something bad happen to Hermione?
I don't know about Hermione. I mean, yeah, bad shit happens.
Oh
to her,
yeah,
but-
she casts a spell on her parents, so they forget that she ever existed
yeah, that's dark.
to keep them safe.
But that was also a really dark book, the 7th book.
Yeah,
It was
but
meant
what I
to be
mean is like
that.
fantasy is often mixed in with like tragedy.
It's
and-
true. Well, and his mom says that she can hear. She doesn't say what, but she says, "I can hear them coming for me at all hours of the day and night." She keeps saying that. I hear them. I hear them coming for me. So
all hours.
yeah, so I just can't even imagine what that would be like. But he basically just keeps his mom going. He just keeps her getting to the next day because it's the only thing he really can do until either his father comes back, because his father's missing. His father isn't confirmed dead. So then he just goes back to translating this book. And what he does is he realizes that Egyptian and Gnomish are similar in that they're both pictograms. So they're descriptions of objects based in picture form. And he starts linking them together, ones that he thinks are similar enough to be the same word.
Did you know that certain Japanese words are built from English words, but it's more like the pronunciation that they would say it, like in a rough English accent? Like milk, they didn't have a word for that, so it's milky. So it's like the offensive Japanese stereotype would be like milky tea, but that's actually how you say it.
And that's actually the word.
Yeah, as far as I know. And my buddy was saying that it would actually kind of make sense because they didn't have cows. Like there would be no.
Yeah, they wouldn't have had
any interaction with milk until they met English-speaking people. So it would actually kind of make sense.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Interesting. Okay. So he takes this sort of rough translation and he uses a Mac, apparently.
A Mac computer.
Yeah, like a Mac computer, and I didn't buy that for a second. He has these stacks of computers up to the ceiling, and yet he's typing away on a MacBook Pro. I don't buy it. I don't buy it for a second. If he's doing any real computing, he's not working on a Mac. I'm
No.
sorry, Eoin.
Well,
That's not
Eoin.
Colfer.
Eoin. Eoin. Sounds like a sound. It's just a sound, dude.
So-
no genius would use a product he can't fucking modify.
Yeah, because he modifies all kinds of things. He modifies fairy technology later on in the story,
exactly.
and he's using a Mac. Come off of it.
We had a Mac. It was terrible.
Yeah, it was. Well, that was a terrible Mac though too.
It was
hard
the same
to judge.
time. Like we got another PC, roughly close to that time, and it was fine.
better. Yeah, that's
because
true.
PCs are fine, and MacBooks cost a car.
So working on his Mac, tick-tapping away, he starts to realize that the pages are not ordered the way a human page is, which was obvious at first, but he now starts to realize that the pages start in the center and essentially work outwards in a spiral.
What?
That's how you read it. That's how you read the pages. So what he had to do is he had to take each individual string of words, because the way it starts in the center and there's a string of words and then an arrow pointing to the next string of words, another string, and then an arrow, so on and so forth. So between every arrow, he strips out those words and pastes them on a piece of paper the way we would read it.
Right.
So that now suddenly it can actually be put through his translating program.
Whoa.
Yeah, so there's actually a lot of work involved in him being able to read it, but it's mostly correct. It sounds like broken English, but he can actually tell what they're trying to say to him. And that's really all he needs. He doesn't need to know exactly what it means. He doesn't need the nuances. He just needs to know the nuts and bolts of it. And the whole idea of this, the reason he's going after them, seemed kind of funny and childish. And actually, he even points out that he's almost the perfect person to do this because he's smart enough to be an adult, but childish enough to believe that fairies exist.
That is exactly where I put Louise from Bob's Burgers.
Yes.
Childish in some senses, but unbelievably mature in other senses.
Super adult in other ways. And his plan is to kidnap a fairy and ransom them for their gold. Like the gold at the end of the rainbow.
Oh, but it's fairies.
But leprechauns
Are fairies.
Are fairies.
Oh.
Yeah. So that's his plan. He's going after the leprechaun gold.
Dude, have you seen that news story where these people claim to have seen a leprechaun?
No.
It is one of the greatest things you've ever... Oh my god. I can't describe it. I can't do justice. Anyway, go ahead. It's like, for the people who know what I'm talking about, they're laughing because they're reminding themselves of what I'm talking about.
Of what you're talking about? So the reason he wants this gold is because the Fowl family fortune... Yeah, the Fowl family fortune is in the toilet right now because his father had this genius plan that at the breakup of the Soviet Union, he was going to bring a bunch of American or European goods and sell them in Russia because they haven't had access to goods. His theory was he'd make a ton of money.
Right.
The Russian mob was not so happy about that, so they blew up his boat while he was on it. So his father and uncle were both blown up on the boat and are missing, presumed dead. And they were, what did it say? They were there with 250,000 cans of Coke or cans of cola. So most of the family fortune went into the boat and the cola, and like, so they lost a tremendous amount of money thinking they were going to be able to sell all of that. And so this is his plan. His plan is to steal the gold from fairies in order to replace his family fortune.
All right.
Right.
I mean, your family already tried going up against a group of people who understood the landscape and the economy.
Yeah.
Why not go up against a significantly more powerful, unknown group of entities that have crazy magic?
My guess is that Artemis is a lot smarter than his dad, so he's...
the issue is that you get to a certain point in intelligence where you start to believe that you are smarter than everybody.
It's a good point.
You can't be outwitted. See, I have a huge advantage on most people, which is that I know where I sit
and you
in the intelligence world. I get it. I know where I am.
Yeah.
I don't think I'm any smarter than most people. I'm smarter than a lot of people. But there's a lot of people in the world.
Yeah. Well, you also do. It's better to be smarter and not think you are than to think you are and not be.
I mean, even when I think I am, it doesn't mean that I'm gonna like think that this person doesn't know what's going on or that I can trick people. I also don't want to trick people, which is sidetracking.
So fairy is a catch-all term, and it covers everything. It covers elves, sprites, gnomes, dwarves, anything that lives underground and is magical in some way is a fairy, quote unquote. That's the umbrella. And then within that are specific subsets. So one of the main characters, her name is Holly Short, which is very appropriate. And she's an elf. And elves are the ones that do the policing in the underground world.
Interesting.
So
they were like the rich folk in that Will Smith one.
And they're the rich folk in this one as well.
Interesting.
The elves are the highborns.
They
always are.
Yeah.
I think people just like pointy ears. Pointy ears are associated with high society.
Well, I think yeah, it's not bad. I think elves are just never like, they're never depicted as like having like ratty clothes or anything. They're always depicted with like silk.
Unless there's poor elves within a rich elf community, because I've seen that in some specific occasions. So the police force is called the Lower Elements Police, and Holly is part of the Recon Division. So they're the LEP Recon Division. And currently their uniforms are biosuits that are...
Leper? Sorry, is that what it's supposed to say? LEPR?
LEP Recon. LEPrecon. And so their old uniform back in the day used to be a top hat with buckled shoes and like knickerbockers. So that's where that comes from. Because
the rest of the podcast from back here.
The LEP are the only ones that are allowed to go surface side, so it would make sense that those are the only ones the humans actually see. Because long ago they lived together, humans and fairies, but that eventually became non-viable because humans are horrible creatures. That's essentially the idea. And when the fairies were forced underground, the only ones that go to the surface are the police, the LEP Recon. So suddenly that becomes the association. It even says at some point that Holly's great-grandfather or something like that was Cupid.
That is so dumb.
There's a lot of silly stuff in here, but so Holly has actually brown skin, not green skin. So I guess there's races within the elves as well. She's about 3 feet tall, which is apparently short even for an elf. And At this point in the story, she's really low on her magic, which is something that fairies have to replenish on a regular basis.
She's just gotta cut a bunch of grass down.
Cut a bunch of grass?
Yeah, pick up the magic refill bottles.
What? You talking about Zelda or something? Oh, okay. I see where you're going with this. So she goes to her headquarters, and when she's heading to her headquarters, she passes an infestation that they're dealing with currently. Apparently, somebody thought it would be a really funny idea to make a swear toad, which is like a parrot, but it's a toad that just swears. And the problem is that they got way out of hand and they started breeding and spreading throughout the lower city. So yeah, now they have this issue where there's these toads just shouting profanities all over the place. Yeah.
This would be a great movie.
It would actually be a good movie.
Like, you make it rated R too, and like give it to oh, you know who would do this really well is what's his name? I want to say his last name is Wright, but I can't remember. Edgar Wright? The guy who directed Hot Fuzz, At World's End, Shaun of the Dead.
The guy who directed it?
Yeah, Hot Fuzz.
Wouldn't know.
No, like sorry, what you know his style through like what you watch. Like, you know how the transitions are done in Hot Fuzz.
Okay, that would actually work. Yeah.
From like scene to scene where it's like like crazy shit where it's like
that would probably work.
Walking by somewhere, or she's walking by, and so you just hear like fuck.
That'd be great throughout the movie.
She like double takes and looks back, and it's just like every profanity at the same time. It's just like it's just like a burst.
So as Holly's going into the station, she passes a bunch of these parent goblins who are demanding the release of their children, because at this point in the story, the goblins and the dwarves are having essentially race wars.
Whoa.
Yeah, like violent gang-related race wars. And Holly even says, if there actually was an innocent goblin, or sorry, well, as I said about her, if there actually was an innocent goblin, Short had yet to meet him. So she is inherently racist against goblins.
Interesting.
But what I find is very unusual about that, if there was ever an innocent goblin, but yet there's parents of goblins there who are presumably innocent, or else they would also be in jail.
Right.
So it just seemed...
But who's this written by? Is that
Eoin.
Is it the voice of Eoin? Who actually... I mean, what if he wrote this to, like, fuck with you? What if all goblins really are fucked up and like the race war is entirely justified?
Well, honestly, all the goblins you meet are really fucked up. It's actually, that's not an overstatement.
That's funny.
So yeah, I would like to think that that's just a non-issue. I would like to sidestep that one.
So.
Yeah. So this is actually the point where you meet the dwarf you're talking about, who eats through his mouth and then craps it out the other end.
Yeah.
So you actually meet him right at the start of the book, because when Holly's walking in, he's picking the pocket of the officer who's arrested him while they're waiting in the line for him to be booked. So just being that much more of a shit disturber. And I think she like whacks him or something, because Mulch is a crazy... Yeah, Mulch Diggums, that's his name.
Mulch Diggums! Oh!
And
I know the name I'm using next time I have to come up with a username.
Nice. He is actually such a career criminal. He has been in and out of jail for over 300 years.
Good for him.
Yeah, so I don't know how...
He just keeps digging them out of there.
I don't know how old he is. But so what Mulch specializes in is he gave up his magic a long time ago in exchange to be able to go into human homes. And so he is a burglar of human homes. He purveys, like, he brings stolen goods from the surface and sells them to people down in their cities. Yeah, so he has kind of a unique role that not many fairies are able to fill.
So if you find a patch of dirt in your basement, you know.
Yeah, well, yeah. He can break in, but he likes to tunnel in.
Oh, okay.
If he can, yeah. Like come up through wine cellars and stuff. Yeah. Mulch is pretty funny. He actually might be one of my favorite characters.
Yeah,
he would he'd be really good in a movie. I feel like he would be one of the favorite characters for sure.
He'd be like
it'd be a kids movie though.
Be like the mustache guy.
They shouldn't make it.
No, because they wouldn't make it
be
right.
good,
But like he's like the mustache guy from Atlantis, where he's like, this is amazing. Must have taken 10,000 years to make this. And he's like, yeah, and it blew it up in like what, 10 seconds? I watched a compilation of like every line he has. He's actually hilarious. Like
In Atlantis?
Atlantis, yeah.
Yeah, I don't know.
Atlantis, yeah.
Yeah,
search
but
for, search for Atlantis.
I barely know that movie though. But that's
it's actually a pretty good movie.
yeah. A lot of people talk about it still. It's one of those cult classic type movies. Just happens to also be a Disney movie. So Holly's commander is a guy named Root.
Wow, that's funny you say that because it's Commander Holly on YouTube.
Of course.
Go on.
So, Root has sort of anger issues, and he really reminds me of Ron Perlman. Like seriously reminds me of Ron Perlman the way because he's always angry. He always has this really red hue to his skin because he's so pissed off. He smokes cigars all the time. He yells at people.
See, this movie's coming together.
It is coming together.
Nice.
So he brings up this incident that Holly was in, the Hamburg incident. They keep talking about this, where clearly whatever she did, she screwed up big time. He says her perp escaped. They had to stop time. They had to wipe 4 people's memories just to fix her issue. So
wow.
So she's kind of on, she's on the edge of losing her job. He even says that he's going to send her to traffic detail, which in the underground means directing ferries because sprites can fly. They're the only subset of fairies that can still fly. Oh. So in their tunnels, you actually have traffic signals for flying sprites and for things on the ground.
I guess you'd have to.
So they actually have to have traffic enforcement police, and he says he'll give her one more chance. That's always how it goes. It wouldn't be an interesting story if she didn't get one more chance.
You're on your last.
So they suddenly get a notification that a troll is
in the dungeon.
Troll in the dungeon. So a troll has made it to the surface and is completely visible and heading towards a human town in Italy.
Oh no.
So this is sort of like a code red for them because a troll is not a
it's not a member of the society.
It's not a sentient creature the same way. Well, no, I guess
it's like an animal. It's a beast.
It's an animal. There you go. It's a beast. That's a very good way to put it. So he asks her. He says, "Are you running hot?" It means, "Do you have full magic?" And she says, "Absolutely."
Running hot, like she instead of putting her hand in her holster, she just like puts up her hand.
No, she has a gun too.
Really?
Oh yeah. They carry.
Magic?
Yeah, they carry.
Real bullets?
No, they're nuclear powered weapons.
Jesus.
Yeah. Oh yeah, their weapons are actually badass. Holly carries a pistol, and her commander carries a tri-barreled blaster. Yeah, they're actually pretty badass, but they're not very effective.
Oh.
Well, their weapons are, but they don't use them. They're stupid sometimes. So she keeps saying to him, like, "Yep, no worries, Commander. I know what you mean. I'm all over it." And he just keeps saying it to her. He's like, "Are you sure?" Because he doesn't trust that she's agreeing with him. You know, one of those things that someone's like always against you, and then suddenly they're in agreement. And you're like, "Wait, why are you agreeing? What are you not telling me? What's going on here?" But either way, he says that she's gonna go to the surface to identify where the troll is, mark its location, and then wait for the remainder of the team to come and scoop the troll up. So she is purely eyes. That's all she's supposed to do.
She's supposed to LEPrecon?
Yes, she's the recon.
The situation?
Well, so she's recon, and then there's another team, which is retrieval. So retrieval comes to where recon is and picks up whatever it is that they're trying to scoop up and take away.
Retrieval?
Yeah, LEP retrieval. That's actually what they would be. It just doesn't work as well.
That sounds great. So
then you meet Foley. Do you remember Foley?
I do remember Foley. All of these names, actually. I remember Mulch and Foley. And
So Foley is a centaur.
Oh.
He is a super paranoid, crazy techie centaur.
Nice.
Who literally wears a tinfoil hat.
Does he have a jetpack? Because it wouldn't work very well for a
Yeah,
centaur.
well, it would just fly him into a wall.
No, because the fire... Oh, I'm thinking about the fire... Oh, I'm thinking about...
No, you put it on the horse's back, and then it would just shoot him forward.
He would just be very fast.
Yeah, he would be an incredibly fast centaur. So he runs surveillance, he runs their communications, he runs their intel and their travel. He does everything. And I don't know how old he is, but I assume hundreds of years. He has to be based off the amount of things that he's done. So he describes the troll to Holly as being about 400 pounds. He doesn't say how tall it is, but later it's housed in a cage that for some reason is 16 feet tall. I don't think the troll's that tall, but imagine it being essentially the size of Frankenstein. 9 or 10 feet tall, 400 pounds, and it has tusks like a boar.
Oh.
Yeah. So it's quite the creature. And this is when she's given her gun, her Neutrino 2000.
Her neutrino. Where do I know that name from?
Well, neutrinos are actual particles that travel outwards from the sun.
Oh.
And they're small enough and fast enough they can travel right through the Earth.
Right.
So my guess is they, I don't know, somehow harnessed that. But either way, her weapon and her camera are both nuclear powered, so they would actually outlive her if she never charged them again, which I thought was pretty cool. All the fairy technology is really cool in this because it's half magic, half technology.
Yeah.
So she goes into one of the chutes. Now the chute is how the troll ended up at the surface. And these chutes either blast hot air or actual magma. They're vents they're like thermal vents for heat to escape from the center of the Earth. Oh. And the fairies have figured out a way to use these things to transmit themselves to the surface really, really quickly.
Whoa.
So they put Holly in this really crappy pod. It's a 50-year-old pod, which for us is a long time. For them, probably not as long.
No.
But when she goes to get in it, there's this stain on the headrest, and she asks him what it is, and he says, "Oh, that's brain fluid from the last guy. There was a pressure leak, and he's mostly fine now."
I think it would have been better storytelling if she just gets in and sees the stain and then just sits down and gets ready for it.
Yeah. Well, he's trying to reassure her. He's like, "Nope, but we fixed it up, so there shouldn't be any problems." And so the way it works is they take your pod and they bring it to the edge. They predict when the surge is going to come, and then they drop you off the edge, and you free fall until the surge hits you.
Whoa.
Yeah, it carries you to the surface. So she free falls, it hits her, and the surge takes her for the first 100 or so kilometers. And then after that, she's on basically just the momentum, as well as she has rockets in the pod so that she can propel herself to the surface.
Wow.
And her pressure seal on the pod breaks.
Of course.
Right before she gets to the surface, about 20 seconds out. Her suit is pressure sealed, so that helps, but she's still kind of like a little body inside. Well, she's a little body inside a tin can. That's essentially what it is, and it's like crumpling inside.
Oh, jeez.
So eventually she makes it to the surface, and she's fine. No brain leakage, which is good. But I'm sure she would kick Foley's ass if she returned sooner than she does. So she arrives at what they call a fairy fort, which is, have you seen Black Panther?
No.
No?
But I've seen Infinity War, so I know I know what Wakanda looks like.
Okay, so you're aware of Wakanda, and you knew I was getting at that. So Wakanda is essentially a mountain that's not a real mountain. It's meant to look like a mountain, but there's actually a city underneath it.
Right.
And the fairy forts are essentially meant to look like hills or natural structures, but really they're points for the fairies to get in and out of the underworld. The underworld. The underground, I guess.
I actually just watched Underworld again. It's not...
okay.
It's not that good.
Yeah.
It has a cool...
Rise of the Lycans might be the best one.
I'm yet to watch anyone beyond the first one. Like, the first one...
You haven't seen Rise of the Lycans?
In a while is what I meant.
Oh, okay.
Like, it has, like, a nice attitude. I thought that was pretty cool. Like, it's just, like, everything's, like, over the top and crazy. But I just can never watch anything where the ratio of bullets that don't hit people is, like, 95%. It's just...
Feels wasted.
It's just, like... sensitivity is what I'm looking for. You're just desensitized. None of it matters anymore. Every time someone pulls a trigger, it's just like ah.
Yeah, it's the polar opposite of John Wick.
Exactly. Yeah, although I haven't seen the second one. Is it good?
I haven't seen the second one either, but I was talking about the first one, which was badass.
Yeah, and basically every shot that John Wick fires hits somebody.
Hits someone, exactly. Yeah. And he gets shot at a couple of times, but not that often, and he gets hit once, I'm pretty sure.
Yeah.
So it's not like he's perfect. So the fairies were forced to go from a partial above ground life to a full underground life because the humans essentially started killing them off.
Oh.
The problem is, even though fairies are immensely more powerful than humans and have a lot more tricks, including literal magic,
there's not enough of them.
A fairy can only reproduce every 20 years.
Oh, shit.
A human can reproduce every 9 months, so there's a 25-time difference in that period.
Holy.
Which to me also means they probably live 25 times longer than a human does, which means they could live for thousands of years, theoretically.
Yeah.
So Holly has complete and total disdain for the way humans live. She really does not like humans. And she sees evidence all over the place of crap that humans are doing. Like she sees sores on the sides of dolphins from pollution, and she sees all these other things that are destroyed out in the world.
She's not wrong.
She's not wrong.
We built an island out of all the garbage we thought
our plastic,
wouldn't ever come back to us. It's like, look how big the ocean is.
Yeah, it's a big pool of water.
Yeah.
So she straps on this set of wings because even though fairies can't fly, they have flying devices. It's essentially a jetpack, but it's actually wings. And it's an ancient set of wings. So much so that she actually has to use a pull cord, like a fucking lawnmower. So she uses a pull cord to get this thing going. And it even says it sputters and spews smoke. So it's really no better than the way humans live,
That's
right?
awesome.
When you think about that. And then she talks about something really human-like, actually. She says that even though she's struggling with this old technology, there are fairies that live in privileged communities who have better sets of wings when they're kids because their parents are rich.
Of course.
And I thought that's so perfect because that's literally exactly how it goes. It's such a common thing.
That's once you have money and power, it's a lot easier to keep it. It's also like becomes like the thing that you're after because you're not after money anymore because you have it.
Yeah.
Like everyone else is like struggling to make it some money, whereas you are just like, what do I want to do today? I don't have to do anything.
Yeah.
I could continue taking money from people.
And you know what? I'm gonna do that.
Yeah.
So fairies have 3 distinct magics that they can use. The first is called a mesmer, and it's essentially the same as a lot of vampires can hypnotize people by looking into their eyes. It's the same idea. They have to make direct eye contact with you, but they can essentially hypnotize you and have you do whatever they want.
The second is making 5 minutes of content on YouTube and then putting a still image for the next 5 minutes and monetizing it and getting away with it.
Yes, that's the second.
It's the most powerful one. That's how they get their money.
The third is shielding, which is not what it sounds like. Shielding is actually invisibility. So it's
shielding from light.
Yes, it's being shielded from vision. And the way it works,
how I said it.
The fairy is actually able to vibrate so quickly that your eye is not able to catch it in any of its stationary positions. So you actually just see a faint shimmer where the fairy is standing because your eyes aren't able to actually process the image of it standing there.
Whoa.
Yeah. And their final ability is healing. So they can heal any organic matter. So they really... Yes. Well, any living matter.
Right.
Yeah.
So you have to
put your hand in some dirt and it just gets more dirty.
You have to like really kill them then.
Yes. Oh yeah, you do. So you could cut a fairy's arm off and it'll come back.
Huh.
As long as they have enough magic.
Which is why they fire atomic bombs at each other and explode each other. It's like RIP PD or whatever it was called.
RIPD,
Ripped.
yeah.
Where it's just like, yeah, we fire like cosmic bullets or whatever. I don't know.
Well, it actually, sometimes when something is too hard to kill, it reminds me of Twilight, where, whatever, Kristen Stewart's character says to Cullen, she says, how do we kill him? And he just, without blinking, he just looks at her and he says, we have to tear him apart and burn the pieces. Holy shit, Edward! Calm down, man. You want to tear him apart and burn the individual pieces. Like, that's how you dispose of a body, my friend. That's not how you kill people. Anyways.
I just love, like, taking things that make sense in, like, a movie context and throwing it into, like, real life.
Yeah,
like, your friend turns, he's like, oh, you know, like, it's like a boardroom meeting. It's like, our competitor has gone 3 points above. Does anybody have any ideas? Tear them apart and burn the pieces.
It's kind of what they do sometimes. We'll take his company, we'll rip it into parts,
yeah,
burn them.
Or we'll buy it, tell them that we have big plans for it, and then dismantle it.
I actually heard about that today. There was 2 companies that were merging, and the one company kind of thought that they were buying out the other company to own it. But what ended up happening was the company they intended to buy out took them over. Yeah, and ended up being in control and ended up letting go people from the company that thought they were taking over the other company.
I think they call it a hostile takeover?
This was more of a honeypot.
Oh, okay.
Because a hostile takeover is, I'm going to take your company and there's nothing you can do.
Right, because you're like in a situation where you have like a a board of directors or whatever, and they are obligated to make the best call for the shareholders. So someone comes along and says, your company is worth $10 million, and I'm going to give you $1 billion. It's like they just have to sell it. There's no choice but to.
Usually, that's not really a hostile takeover. A hostile takeover would be, I know you own 30% of your company, and the other 70% is sold on the stock exchange. Oh. So all I need to do is buy 51% of the shares that are on the stock exchange, and I own the company.
So what was mine called then?
Yours would just be a really good offer to the directors. It would be hostile if one of the directors didn't want it, or if one of the shareholders didn't want it. It'd be hostile to them. But generally, a hostile takeover is literally forcible. There's no way around it, even if you say no. Yeah, and So Holly is now at the surface trying to find this troll, and the troll has made it to this town wall, because in Italy, a lot of towns used to be forts, right? So there's actually a physical stone wall on the outside of the town. And the troll is scared, which actually makes it more dangerous than anything else. Any animal really is most dangerous when it's scared.
Yeah.
So she's told to do nothing, to just watch the troll, see what it does, and wait for retrieval to show up. And I think they said it was 5 minutes out. But this troll is actually about to break through this brick wall. And this one child yells help when the troll bursts through the wall. And Holly interprets that help as an invitation to enter, because they need it. They need someone to give them permission. Right. So as long as they can interpret it as permission, they can go in. Yeah. So suddenly they refer to precedences many times. Like, yes, there is a precedent. This does count.
So there's like some sort of like magical being, like,
I don't know,
universe fabric that like is that operates the way to the law works, where you can argue that you
But this isn't a home. This is a restaurant.
Oh.
Sorry. So this is it is a human space, but it is not a human dwelling, and that's the key. A human dwelling, you need overt permission. Oh. But yes, as far as this goes, that counted. So she takes that as an invitation. She goes in to try and fight this troll. So she shoots the troll to distract it, and then assumes that it won't be able to see her because of her shield. But it's a troll, so it knows what a shield is. So it sees her shimmering, like it sees that waver in the light, and it just picks up a table and throws it at her. And so she's thinking, okay, doesn't see me. And
it sees me.
Exactly. She just barely doesn't get out of the way of the table, so the table ruptures her wings, which are like diesel powered or something stupid. So now she's flying around the room uncontrollably, spilling diesel oil in an Italian restaurant filled with candles, so the candles catch the diesel on fire. So now she ends up basically pouring gas on the troll inadvertently. So now the troll is like on fire. The restaurant is on fire. Her wings have come off. I don't think she has them anymore. And the troll is like holding her right in front of its face, like it's about to bite her head off. And she fires up the headlamps on her helmet to blind the troll.
Okay.
And so I guess at this point, the troll is finally done for, because it's been shot, it's burning, and now it can't see anything. So I'm pretty sure it basically just collapses.
It sounds more like a Michael Bay movie now.
A little bit, yeah. It was, and then it's so funny, because now Holly's completely visible, so she just stands up, and in Italian she just goes, "Excuse me, everyone." And then she takes out this orb and she rolls it into the middle of the room and says, "Look." And then the orb goes off and immediately knocks everybody out. It's like an MIB type thing where, it's a neuralizer, but instead of actually wiping their memories, it just puts them out so you can wipe their memories later.
So it's like a two-step process.
Yeah, it's not as effective. And then after that happens, she just passes out in place. Like, she's just so exhausted from this whole ordeal and probably concussed and so she passes out. And then this I do have a question that you had, like, how is it that she was able to enter this space? Like, she needed a precedent, but she didn't get sick when she entered, and then later they get sick when they enter. I don't know. Deal with it, Eoin. Anyways.
No, Eoin's not the one who has to deal with it.
Yeah.
It's the reader.
It makes sense in the way the story plays out. I never questioned it until I was going through making notes, and that's when I really picked up on that.
It's the curse of creators.
You can only do so much, right?
Yeah.
So she gets woken up, and a child comes out of the washroom who I guess was not privy to the whole troll incident. So when the child comes out of the washroom, all of them put their shields on, but Holly can't because now her magic is on 0.
Oh.
And now she's exposed in front of her commander as having no magic when she just lied to him and said that she had full magic.
Ooh.
Yeah, so now he was somewhat happy about how she managed the situation, and even though it was bad, it wasn't terrible. But now he's pissed again.
Couldn't she have, hid behind one of them? Oh, wait. They're invisible.
Yeah, that wouldn't have worked. So then he says, you must go and replenish your magic right now. So don't even come back underground. Just go get more magic and then come back to us.
You can get magic above ground?
It's the only place you can get magic.
Oh.
So the ritual that the fairy must complete to get magic is they must pick a seed from an ancient oak tree near the bend of a river. And it has to be picked up during a full moon.
Because natural turns in the Earth's erosion bring magic.
I honestly think you were right when you said there's some sort of being that chooses who gets magic and who doesn't. I honestly think that's the most likely thing. That the council, because they have a council, likely sets charms that are so powerful they're able to affect all fairies everywhere in the world. That is my best guess.
Whoa! Whoa!
It's possible.
What if they're all in the Matrix?
They are in the Matrix. So she picks a seed. So you need to pick a seed and then bury it elsewhere. So not burying it where the oak is. That's the ritual, and when you do that, your magic will return to you immediately. So it's been 4 years since Holly did the ritual. So this is something that you need to do regularly, but regularly for a fairy is a long time because their lives are so much longer. This is the point at which their paths start to collide. So Artemis asks that Juliet build a prison in his home. Build essentially a concrete cell with a steel door. And then he sets out on this mission to kidnap a fairy because he knows this ritual. He knows that it has to be near a tree in the river bend, and it has to be on a full moon. So he starts cross-referencing places where you can find it, because it has to be an ancient oak tree, which is not that common.
Oh, okay.
So he starts referencing where do you find ancient oak trees and where are they near rivers. And he realizes, I think there's something like 26 different locations that it could be. So I think they spend 4 or 6 months going from place to place to place every single full moon to try and see if a fairy will show up.
That's a tall order, because you can just stay there for each full moon and miss another one
on a different site. Yeah, and that's so true, and that's why they're just shooting in the dark. But what's kind of interesting is that Holly...
it's not fully dark because it's a full moon.
But... So Holly chooses to go to a place that's sort of off the beaten track, and she chooses to do that because it's waterlocked. It's on an island, so she assumes that less people will be there, but that just so happens to be the site that Artemis is staking out on that particular night. So she lands, and she sets down her wings, and then, well, I guess I should start with a little more detail. So Ireland is like the holy land for fairies, and it's weird.
Part of it, though.
What do you mean? Oh, is there 2 parts? There's north and south?
Yeah.
I don't think they care about the petty squabbles of the last couple hundred years.
They're not separated by land, though. Like it's
separated
by water.
So my guess is that Ireland... Well, she even says if humans were at any point related to fairies, it would be the Irish. That's what she says. And that's where their mecca is, essentially. They have this place called Tara. And Tara is supposedly where the ancient fairies got their power from.
Earth?
No, Terra, T-A-R-A.
Isn't that what it means, though?
No,
Earth?
well, Earth is T-E-R-R-A. Terra.
But but the word probably comes from Earth. Though.
Probably does, yeah. Yeah, at the end of the day. So the reason she avoids that site, even though that's the best place to go if you want to replenish your magic, is because it's a tourist destination. So fairies are actually able to book tourist trips to go to Terra. And she even describes it as saying, on a full moon at Terra, it would almost feel like you're underwater because there's so many fairies with shields on that all of the area would be shimmering.
Wow.
Yeah, and I thought that was kind of interesting. So she chooses to go to this small little area, and that just happens to be where Artemis is with Butler. So Artemis designed this ingenious tent that's able to mask your electrical signal, mask your heat signature, and also be visually undetectable in a forest. Like, it's camouflaged the way, most camouflage would work. And that's the only reason Holly doesn't see him, because she scans the whole area for heat signatures first. So she's not stupid. Artemis is just smarter.
Right.
And it's even kind of cool because Artemis is apparently offered by military companies, or not military companies, by the military and by private militaries to license the technology for this tent, but he chooses to sell it to a sporting goods outfitter instead because he feels like it's more equitable.
What?
Yeah, and I thought that was pretty cool. So he designs this wicked tent and he sells it to the public rather than keeping it private.
Yeah.
So Holly goes to get her seed, and right as she goes to lean down for the seed is when they try and trank dart her. So the trank dart goes flying over her head. Classic Three Stooges style. So Holly notices that because it probably bounces off of something. So she ducks for cover, but by the time she's able to figure out what's going on, they're right on top of her. And they're wearing mirrored sunglasses. And the mirrored sunglasses mean that even though they can see her eyes, she can't see theirs. So she can't use her mesmer on them. You need that direct eye-to-eye contact. So they're wearing mirrored lenses, which means she can't use the only magic left to her.
Whoa.
And then she tries to shoot Butler with her gun, and Butler grabs her entire gun and gun hand in his hand. And it even says she let go just in time to keep her fingers from breaking. So imagine a 3-foot tall person versus a 7-foot tall person. I mean, he's probably 6'5", 6'7", something like that. And Artemis, being a child, is kind of interesting. He's in the middle. He's probably, 4 feet 6, something like that. And he even talks to her and basically just tells her, we're going to kidnap you. It's very, like, he doesn't say it in those words, but he's basically he knows everything and tells her he knows everything.
Does he pace with his hands behind his back while he does it? He kind of seems like that kind of guy.
No, there wasn't much time. And then I think Butler just whacks her in the head and knocks her out. Classic human style. But the whole time, Root and Foley, who are watching this, who are watching this on her camera, are now just as aware as Holly is as to what the situation is going to be. So now Artemis has some idea that the fairies have caught on to him. Now it's official. Now the chase is on. So up to this point, everything was planning. Everything was gathering information, figuring out what they're going to do. And now it's purely execution. So Root decides that he's going to actually go out in the field himself to find Holly, which is one of those super cliche things too. He's like, I'm reinstating myself. Pulls a few strings and gets it to happen and straps on his tri-barrel blaster. He's going on a crusade. He's going to go find Holly. So Artemis finds the locator they're using to track Holly, and he disassembles it. And the only way he's able to disassemble it is he has to use a magnet because their screws don't have heads. The screws are magnetically screwed into place. Which is actually something we have modernly.
We do.
Yeah, it's not completely impossible. So he manages to disassemble it and install a pinhole camera into the locator. And then he says that they need to go to the docks. And at the docks, there's a whaling ship that had been brought in recently. and the whaling ship is what's that word? Seized, I guess. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah.
Yeah. I don't know. I thought there was a better word I was gonna use.
Confiscated?
Commandeered.
Oh.
Commandeered, but that's not really the right word. Seized. So it was seized from illegal poachers. So what he does is he goes
I'm
and
pretty sure poaching is always illegal, unless you're talking about eggs.
That's a good point. Actually, poaching is kind of defined
It's like
as illegal.
no
Yeah.
illegal dumping. Like no shit.
Yeah.
No shit.
Oh,
You can't do
man.
illegal things here.
So what he does is he has Butler present a distraction for the dock workers because they know that there's probably police watching the boat. So Butler just walks up to these dock workers and just starts insulting them left, right, and center. And then when he attacks them, when they attack him, he does all these, like, so instead of efficiently taking people out the way he would want to, like just neutralizing them, he like knocks one guy out with a roundhouse kick, and he takes one guy and like clunks his head against another guy's head, and then he takes two of them and just hurls them into the water. So he just does all this really comical stuff to try and draw attention.
Seems like one of those moments where like one way or another.
It sort of reminds me actually of the scene from
Shrek.
From Kingsman. Where they're in the church.
Yes. What a crazy! Didn't they do that? Isn't that like done with a one shot?
I don't know if it's done with one shot. It's supposed to look like a continuous shot.
Sorry,
yes, it
like,
is.
Yeah,
absolutely. And I believe it's Freebird.
Yes,
it is Freebird.
It's the crazy solo.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It may be one of the greatest scenes in violent movie history.
Like stab someone through the eye with a broken broom.
Kills a lot of people in that scene.
Actually.
And a lot of people kill each other too. That's a vicious scene. So Root heads to the surface, having used a much better shuttle than Holly did. It's one of those things when a commander comes into the field, suddenly he gets all the nice stuff. So he gets sent to the surface, and he tells the director of the place where ferries are received at the surface, who is essentially a TSA agent, but for the ferries. He tells him no one else is coming through, like this is a code red. And so the director immediately gets on his phone and calls the guy and he says, yeah, I want to sell all my shares in the shuttle service. Because he knows it's about to go down. Like, he knows something's coming. And I thought that's cool. There's all these little hints that show you that ferries are basically the same as we are.
That's the point, I think.
That is the whole point, is that we're just different. So Holly wakes up. She's got a ridiculous headache. She actually can barely move when she first gets up. And Juliet's watching her because Juliet's a little shit disturber. She's weird, and she's super into wrestling. And she's always talking about choke slamming people and like pile driving people and stuff, which is so ridiculous because her brother, Butler, is the most efficient, ruthless killing machine that you've ever met. And then his sister is into WWE. It just doesn't make any sense. It really doesn't make any sense.
You haven't watched Glow yet, right?
Glow? No.
No, I highly recommend it. Alison Brie is in the Weeds creator produces it. It's a women's wrestling TV show filming in the 80s.
Okay.
So it's like super offensive because it was made in the 80s.
In the 80s, yeah.
It's awesome.
Interesting. Okay. So she obviously has to follow the orders of the humans in the house, but she starts to notice there's something digging into her foot, which she later finds out is the acorn. It somehow ended up in her boot during the whole struggle.
So I know where this is going.
So she still has the acorn, and they don't know that at this point. So Root pulls up an overlay of Dublin on his visor so that he can see all the roads and things like that over top of the physical landscape. And he says, what the hell is this? This doesn't look anything like what I'm looking at. The coastline's not even the same. He says, when was the last time this information was updated? And Foley says, let me have a look. 1875. So he gives him a more up-to-date version of it. And
this is shaping up to be a really good film.
It would be. So he notices that the tracker is now offshore because it's on the whaler. That's where Artemis planted it. But because it's such an ancient boat, it's covered in lead paint, and a lot of it is made with lead. So they can't actually see where she is in the boat. They just know that that's where the tracker is coming from. So they have no thermal vision inside, nothing. They are walking in completely blind.
To a place where she isn't even there.
Exactly. So Root gets on the boat and goes down into the cabins. And it's kind of interesting. There's a bunch of rats, and he actually shoots one of them to prove a point, because he points out that when you're only 3 feet tall, a rat is a much more dangerous adversary.
Yeah.
So he actually blasts one of them just to prove a point. And then he gets all the way to the end of this hallway, and there's a freezer. And when he walks into the freezer, suddenly there's breath, but no person making the breath because he's shielded.
Oh,
so that's how Artemis knows he's there, because Artemis has the pinhole camera in Holly's locator. So he sees this breath coming out of nowhere, and he knows he's talking to a fairy. So then Artemis's voice comes over, and he says that he wants to demonstrate how committed he is to this task. And so, Root's talking to him, and he even tells him his name. He says, "My name is Artemis Fowl, and this is a demonstration." And then Root turns over what's sitting in the box, and it's a bomb. So he has to run off the ship, and then the whole ship just explodes.
Oh, shit.
Basically put a brick of C4 in there. And when it's all over, Artemis goes, "Good. I never really liked whalers." I just thought that was just a really dark way to...
Wow.
And it's kind of funny because Root doesn't die, but there's another way this story could go where Root dies right there. Right? Because if he hadn't moved fast enough, he would have been consumed by the blast.
Right.
Presumably. Because Artemis doesn't know how durable a fairy is. He's just guessing.
Yeah.
He doesn't know how long he needs to get out. He's just guessing. So there's totally a reality where the commander dies, and this whole thing goes in a much more dark direction, because now he's a fairy murderer, not just a fairy kidnapper. It's a very different thing, right?
Interesting.
My guess is that if he had killed the commander, instead of talking to him, they probably would have just killed him, Holly, all of them. They would have just leveled his whole house and just called it a day. So in some ways, he maybe got lucky there.
Yeah.
And when Artemis finishes this little ploy, he hears that his mother claims that his father has returned. And so at first he's kind of excited, but then he goes up to the room and he finds his mom with a pillow covered in his dad's clothing from the day of their wedding, and she's hanging out with it as if that is his dad. And so he comes in and he sort of confronts her, and she looks at Artemis and she starts talking to him, and he realizes she thinks that Artemis is his own grandfather.
What?
Because she keeps calling him dad. She keeps saying,
Whoa.
Can't we have one more hour? Can't we have another night? And so he says, "All right, you guys take the night, be lovebirds."
Oh, dude.
And she's super excited.
Do you remember the scene in Game of Thrones? Maester Aemon is having a fever, and he's talking to his brother in his dream. His brother died 80 years ago.
Yeah.
And he's like, "Aemon," or
Egg.
Yeah. He's like, "I had a dream I was old."
That was so
Oh my god, that gave me the
sad.
chills. I was like, holy fuck, that's good writing.
That I was an old man. Oh, that was so dark. So Artemis goes to talk to Holly, and he doesn't want to give up that he has the book yet. So what he does is he tells her that he's been drugging her for 3 days, and that she is the one that revealed all this information to him under the influence of these drugs. And she is actually, at this point, less concerned about herself and Artemis and more concerned about what will happen when humans find out fairies exist. Really concerned. And that's actually what most of the fairies are worried about, because most of them know the history, whereas obviously humans don't, because they've been made ignorant of it. And she's sort of destroyed by this because she wholeheartedly believes it at this point. She thinks she's a traitor to her own people, which is helpful for Artemis. It helps build up the whole ploy. And this is actually the point where Foley starts to catch on that Artemis is smarter than everyone thinks. Because the boat was clearly planned, that whole thing. And he warns him. He says, this guy's been one step ahead of us the whole time, and he told us his name, so something's going on here. And Foley is ignored for the entire story. Completely. No matter how many times he says, this guy is ahead of us, this guy knows what we're going to do, no one ever listens to the Centaur. That's just the way it goes.
Nobody listens to Centaur anymore.
There's a lieutenant who suggests that they should just bomb the place right off the bat. So the fairies have a bomb, I'm sure this is familiar to you, called a biobomb.
Yes.
Which destroys all living matter and does not touch anything else.
In Killjoys, they have a new biobomb that can be specifically designed for certain groups of people from different lineages.
Jesus.
So like they set it off and it just like vaporizes like 6 people in a party. Just like there's just like piles of like ash.
Weird.
Yeah, it's crazy.
So he suggests they set off the bomb right now. They call it a blue rinse. Just
a blue
take
rinse.
Everyone out. Take out the humans.
That's gross.
It's gross.
That's like the atomic bomb. You know, it had a name, right? The one that they dropped on Hiroshima?
No.
They both had names, but one of them was called like the Fat Man. Like they had like cute nicknames for this like horrible, devastating thing. I think that this whole thing is actually supposed to be...
It's all a commentary. It really is.
A human thing, yeah.
So he suggests they just do that just to make the situation simple. And in this conversation, Root compares him to a human, and he's deeply offended by that. And so much so that Root even feels the need to apologize to him for making the comparison because it's so offensive. So that's basically the worst insult they have. It's to be called a human. To be compared to a human.
That's rough.
It's really rough.
I mean, we do call each other assholes. That's pretty
rough too.
Yeah. I mean, like, from an outside perspective, it's like, yeah, they like refer to each other by like, they're assholes.
They choose not to do that, and they approach the house to basically feel out the situation. And Artemis is again one step ahead of them. He bought a camera that can record at 2,000 frames per second. So when you're watching a live feed of the camera, you can't see the fairies because your eyes still can't adjust to how quickly the frames are changing. But if you freeze frame, you can instantly see all the fairies. They just appear because you're only looking at a single frame rather than a whole bunch.
Oh, wow.
And so Butler's just sitting there and he's thinking, okay, no fairies, no fairies, no fairies. And Artemis says, okay, pause it. And he pauses it. And then he literally jumps up out of his chair because these things just appear in front of him. So Artemis designs a version of Holly's helmet that is big enough to fit onto Butler's head because their helmets have an anti-shielding mode, which makes sense. They're police officers. They have to be able to enforce laws. And if they can't see the perps, it's not very helpful.
Right.
So now Butler can see them, but they don't know this. So Butler puts on a hood, and they're all sort of hanging out in the front area right outside the front door, essentially. So as one of them approaches the front door, Butler sees it there and just clobbers him with the door. Basically kicks the door open, knocks him 10 feet into the bushes. He's out, gone. And all the other fairies think it's an accident. So they're just silent and still. And so he walks out into essentially right into the middle of them. And when he gets too close, so he's in the middle of a circle of them, so they can't use their weapons because they'll shoot each other.
Right.
So as they're switching from their weapons to their batons, he notices that they're all looking towards one guy. And he figures that's the leader. So he just... What is he even... He even starts... He says something like, evening, gentlemen. And then he just starts wrecking all of them.
That's like this scene in Game of Thrones when Daenerys pretends to not speak Valyrian. And the guy who owns the Unsullied keeps like calling her a whore and shit like that.
Yeah.
And she just like lights him on fire. She's like, a dragon cannot be tamed, like in Valyrian. She's like, I am from Valyria. How could you not
old Valyria?
How did you not think that I speak that?
Or that other scene where they think that they have all the control when she's meeting with the leaders of the Khals, and then she goes, "Oh well, we'll see how you guys do with a little bit of fire." So he completely destroys the whole group of them, and then he takes one who's still more or less awake, and he says, the deal is that only unarmed medics are allowed in. Anyone else who comes in will be shot and killed. That's the deal. So they're able to collect their wounded and take them away, but that's all. That's the plan. So at this point, Butler has established a no-go zone, essentially an area they cannot cross. And he also says, send someone for us to speak with, and I want it to be someone who's in charge, someone who actually has the ability to give us what we want. So essentially, they're asking for Commander Root, whether or not they know about it. Artemis thinks that there's no way that anything could dig into the manor because he's aware of how dwarves work. He knows that they dig underground. But what he doesn't realize is that one portion of the manor was actually built on dirt rather than on bedrock. Oh. Because the rest of the manor was built so long ago and on bedrock that there's no way to dig into it whatsoever. But as the house grew and expanded over the centuries, eventually they built a cellar right over top of the soft ground. So they're susceptible and they don't really know it either. And then the time stop starts. Yeah, time stop starts. So the time stop used to be a magical invention. It used to be that you needed wizards to stand in a pentagram, which means 5 wizards, and they would channel the time stop, which meant that as soon as one of the wizards stopped channeling, the whole time stop fell apart. So it was not a very good system because the wizards themselves had to be available for the duration of the time stop.
Right.
And they could only get maybe an hour and a half at the most, which is not a whole lot of time to work with. So what Foley did is he found a way to channel the warlock's magic into machines that then serve the function that the warlocks would. So now they can have a time stop for up to 8 hours. Yeah, so it suddenly changes the game on what they're able to do.
Any shape we want. This is a butterfly.
So this is kind of an interesting part of the book. This is where they give you a little bit of a hint, but I'm just going to give it away now. So as soon as the time stop starts, this blue hue takes over the world. It just feels unusual because the sky is not coming through the same color. It's coming through in this weird bluish tinge. And as soon as the time stop begins, they notice that Artemis's mom has disappeared completely.
Whoa.
Someone who's a shut-in and never leaves her room is suddenly gone. And so what you come to find out later is that the time stop, the only way it's able to connect you to that point in time is through your consciousness. That's how it straps you in to the world where time has frozen.
So his mom's not there.
His mom leaves because she entered it awake and then took sleeping pills that she has as part of her illness. And when her consciousness was forcibly shut off, it severed the connection between her and the time stop, putting her back into regular time.
What?
Yeah. So this actually, I'll give you a little more context as well. So the time stop was actually invented by the original Santa Claus. So there was a fairy named San de Class. That was the name of the fairy, and he believed that he could make all of the humans in his kingdom happy by giving them gifts. So what he would do is he would freeze time so that anyone who is asleep cannot wake up, and anyone who is awake cannot fall asleep in the time stop. So that would mean they had enough time to deliver presents out to people because time was actually frozen. Yes, so when she takes these heavy sedatives that forcibly shut off her consciousness, it kicks her out of the time field. She ends up in a regular where she would be otherwise. It's very confusing.
I'm not sure I understand, but okay. So where is she?
So Artemis and everyone else is stuck at, let's say, 3 a.m.
Right.
Angeline, because she exited the time stop a few seconds later, she goes at 3:03.
Oh.
Then let's say she waited 4 hours and then took the sleeping pills. She would exit at 7 o'clock. So she goes from the frozen time to whatever normal time it would actually be.
So it's not really freezing time. So, like, from your perspective, when time is frozen, like, are people still walking around?
In the outside world?
Yeah.
In the outside world, everything is moving at a snail's pace. basically not moving, but moving just enough that you can tell it's still in motion.
Okay.
So if a bird was flying, that bird would essentially be inching forward millimeter by millimeter. Yeah. So that's the history of the time stop. Root then goes in to negotiate because at this point, that's the only option that they have left. So Root literally goes in unarmed, which is somewhat unusual. But he takes one thing with him. He has this dart finger. It goes over your actual finger, and it looks just like your finger, but it has one dart in it.
One dart.
One dart. So that's his backup weapon.
That's amazing. It's so dumb.
It is kind of dumb, but it's better than nothing. So when he goes in to talk to Artemis, Artemis essentially says, I want 1 ton of 24 karat gold in exchange for Holly's life. That's the deal. And he tells Root that he can escape from the time field, meaning that their whole plan, which is to contain him to the time field, is useless. Essentially pointing out to him that this is not a normal negotiation. He can't use the book anymore.
So Artemis has access to magic and instead uses it to just get real gold.
Yes, I suppose. But what do you mean access to magic?
He has access to the book of magic.
But he can't perform magic himself.
Oh.
No, he couldn't perform the ritual and get magic because he's not an elf.
Oh.
Or a fairy, I suppose. So no, that would have been a much better way to do it. But no, he has to do it this way. So they believe that they don't believe that Artemis can escape, but they believe that he believes it. And that's what they're working on at this point.
Okay.
But Artemis also says something else very specific, and he means to say this. He says, none of you are permitted back here while I'm alive. Very specifically. And the fairies interpret that to mean once he's dead, they're allowed in his home. Because that's what he said. As long as I'm alive, you're not allowed here. So, contrary to that, he would be allowed if Artemis was dead.
Huh.
Root then brings in Mulch Diggums.
Diggums!
So, 300 years in and out of prison.
I love digging holes.
He's a dwarf tunneler, and he's actually in a cell when you first meet him for real. He's in a cell with a bunch of goblins, and the idea is that he was sort of tossed in there for having picked the pocket of his arresting officer. Not a good idea. So he's in this place with the goblins, and this is where you start to realize how dangerous a dwarf actually is, because there's the leader of the goblins is screwing with him. What? I see a look in your eyes.
I remember something about dwarves. Go ahead, sorry.
So he contemplates just eating the leader straight out because he feels like it might diffuse the situation. But he says that goblins are murder on digestion, so that's why he chooses not to eat him in one bite.
Oh.
So
listen, buddy.
So then the leader creates a fireball because goblins are actually able to make fire, and he inhales it into his mouth because the plan is to shoot it out of his nose at Mulch. And I guess it's supposed to be some sort of, I don't know. That's how he did it.
Okay.
So he inhales it, and when he goes to exhale it, Mulch shoves his thumbs in the guy's nose so that the fireball comes spewing out of his tear ducts and his ears and everything, just right out of his sinuses. And then at that moment, the rest of the goblins turn on him. So he chomps his jaws around one of their skulls and says, if anyone comes closer, I'm going to crush his skull. So they're not to be screwed with.
Wow.
Dwarves are dangerous. And at that point, the door opens and he's taken away. So it's one of those super tense moments.
It's like a who's that fighter? Something Johnson or whatever? The bare knuckle fighter that Tom Hardy played?
Oh, Bronson.
Yeah. It sounds like one of those moments where it's like, yo, locked in here with me.
So they bring him in to the time stop, but one of the interesting things about a time stop, because it exists as a magical place, no matter how long it took to get Mulch out of prison, and into the portal, he appears seconds after he was requested. Because anything happening outside the time stop is irrelevant to the timeline of their little world. So he says, send for Mulch Diggums, and a few seconds later he walks out of the portal.
Doesn't Doctor Who do that? He goes to like a spot like a second before or after like the rest of the universe or something like that.
Yeah.
Like to hide.
Yeah.
He's like, yeah, I'm just like a second ahead of everybody else or something like that.
Yeah, I do actually remember that. So they give him an iris camera that goes on as a contact lens but has an actual camera in it. And it also monitors his vitals so that they can tell whether or not
you can actually do like that's actually like eye doctors can tell a lot about your condition of your blood something.
Well, yeah, if your eyes are yellow or have other tinges to them. Or...
Oh, no, blood pressure though.
Oh,
they can tell blood pressure from your eyes now.
Really?
Yeah, the last time I got my eyes checked, which I was not going there to get my blood pressure checked. He's like, your blood pressure's good, and I'm like, all right.
Yeah, good for you.
They like shine like 3 different types of light through your eyes, and that's where like your blood vessels are like the easiest to read.
Yeah, I bet they are
because
there's
they're
nothing,
like
no skin.
super exposed. Yeah.
Huh. So they point Mulch in the direction of that cellar I was talking about earlier, and they say that's your point of entrance. And Mulch actually is able to find it because he's able to taste the wine in the soil, because over time small amounts of it end up down underneath the actual cellar. So
that may explain why certain places have more drunks.
Potentially.
Because they're actually grown on drunk land, alcoholic land.
So he breaks into this, and he has this really interesting feature where his beard hairs, as soon as they are released from his skin, they immediately harden like metal. So he's able to take one of his beard hairs and use it to pick a lock.
That's an awful existence.
Sort of.
Like, my beard hair gets everywhere.
It's true. I don't think he loses it nearly as often.
Imagine if you're, like, trimming your beard hair, and it's like, click, 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 click. It's like nuts and bolts.
That's a good point. They land on the ground hard. So Foley puts a 10-second loop on the cameras in the Fowl Manor so that...
Classic.
Yeah, classic. Something that you would assume Artemis would be looking out for, but clearly was not intending on. I'm not really sure how he missed that one. But anyways, he finds a room because he's trying to find a secluded area, because something that happens to dwarves when they do a lot of tunneling is that they get a lot of gas built up because there's air in the actual soil.
This is the thing I was remembering.
So yeah, he essentially has this hurricane fart ready. And he's trying to find a place to get rid of it. So he goes into this room, and there's like 3 or 4 cameras all pointing at the same picture, which is really sketchy, obviously.
Oh.
So he moves the picture, and it's a safe. So he breaks into the safe, takes him very little time to do, and it's just filled with money. So they think, okay, well, not a big deal. But then he thinks, this is, like, why would a genius do this? Why would a genius have all these cameras pointed at an obvious safe that's not hard to break into? So then he goes back and he finds a smaller safe within that safe, which is actually not that uncommon. I feel like that's actually somewhat
really
realistic. Well, if you
there's usually like a separate compartment within there.
Well,
right?
exactly. That's what I mean. Like there's a compartment he finds that requires a specialized key, and he's able to mimic the specialized key by putting his beard hair into it and then plucking it so that it stays in the shape of the key.
Whoa.
Yeah.
Whoa.
And when he breaks into that safe, he finds one of Artemis's copies of the book. So now the fairies know that Artemis actually has their playbook and that he's not just some sort of weird evil genius who kidnapped Holly and took all of her information.
He almost is, though. Every part except for taking the information.
Yeah, exactly.
Except he did take it from a different source. So they're actually back to square one.
So as he's figuring this out, Butler is sneaking up behind him because Butler has just gotten into position, and right at that moment he's not able to hold his hurricane back and just sends Butler flying across the room and basically just totally incapacitates him for a period of time. So Artemis at this point notices that something is going wrong with the cameras because he should have heard that noise, but he's not hearing it.
The loop didn't go off. or the loop didn't tip him off, but his fart detectors did.
Yeah.
He's like, I knew I should have.
I smelt that. So
I'm gonna use that clip of you saying that. That's so perfect that you said that.
So at this point, Holly has been trying to find a way to plant that acorn. So what she's been doing is she's been slamming her cot into the fresh concrete, trying to bust it open just enough to get to the soil underneath.
Yes, I remember that.
She finally gets to it and pockets that little acorn down there, and it immediately replenishes her magic. So when Juliet comes into the room to feed her, she's shielded. So Juliet assumes there's no one in there and takes her glasses off. So when she takes her glasses off, suddenly she can be mesmered. So Holly gets her and tells her that there's a giant screen on the wall playing wrestling. Nice. So she's sitting there watching a concrete wall. And Holly meets up with Mulch and finds out that... What?
John Cena, you can't see me.
Because I'm behind a wall.
No, you can't see me. Invisible gnomes or whatever.
Jesus. So Holly now knows that she didn't sell anybody out. She knows that Artemis has the book, and it really changes her mindset. Suddenly she's more determined. Suddenly she's angry again. So Butler almost catches up to Mulch before he's able to leave. But what ends up happening is he doesn't really remember how he got knocked out because he doesn't remember the whole hurricane fart incident.
Right.
But as soon as he goes to try and grab Mulch while he's like going down into the hole under the wine cellar, as soon as he sees like the flap on his pants, he remembers what it was that knocked him out.
The flap.
Something's got to trigger you, right?
Of course he's got the flap because he pulled his pants right off.
Yeah, exactly. So Butler lets him go, which is a smart move because the last thing you want to do is get dragged underground by a dwarf. It's like being dragged under the water by an alligator. It's not a good call. So he essentially lets him go. And then this really interesting thing happens with Mulch that I didn't really see coming when I first read the books. He notices that there's these rabbits in a tunnel near him. So what he does is he tunnels next to the rabbit burrow, and when he senses a rabbit coming along, he snatches it and kills it.
What?
And then he takes out his iris cam and puts it into the rabbit's eye and pretends that the cave is falling in on him and that he's dying, so that when they check the vital signs, he's dead.
Whoa.
Yeah, so now the LEP actually assume that Mulch is dead from cave-in. And in their minds, they're thinking it's sad, but it's one less loose end to tie up.
Right.
So they're just sort of thinking that's okay. So they're not thinking about it
Mulch
twice.
is like outside help.
Yeah, he's a convict, right?
And he knows that.
Exactly.
And he knows that, like, so he's not...
He's going back to jail.
He doesn't give a fuck about this mission.
Exactly.
He's getting out of there.
Well, he did his job, and now he knows he's going to go back to jail, so he's not about that life. Doesn't want that at all. So Foley almost figures it out, but he's actually interrupted by the analysts finally picking up on what Artemis said about you can only enter the house while I'm dead,
right?
Essentially. So the plan then becomes, we'll send in the gold, and then we'll get Holly out, and then we'll blast them with the bomb, and then walk in and get the gold once he's dead. Easy peasy, right? It shouldn't be any harder than that, because they still assume he can't get out of the time field.
Right.
Because they don't know that Angeline has already left the time field. Yeah, they haven't figured that part out. This is the interesting part about the time stop. Because you can't change your state of consciousness, everyone who's awake has to stay awake. So no matter how tired you get, you won't sleep. You'll just get more and more and more tired. So everyone near the end of this is starting to just be drained and empty because of that. Doesn't seem to affect them much, but they talk about it occasionally. So, yeah. Anyways. So Root's subordinate, the guy who wanted to just blast the whole place, totally goes around him and gets clearance to actually try and resolve the situation without Root. His plan is to send in the troll that they captured back in Italy
Oh, shit.
and use the troll to elicit a cry for help that they can then interpret as an invitation to enter the home.
Huh.
That's the plan.
Please search warrant.
Yes, exactly. So, because of all... This is the weird part about this segment of the story. Holly is now free to roam the house because she's escaped her cell.
Right.
But she's not free to leave because Artemis never gave her permission to leave.
Oh, shit.
She physically can't leave the house, but she's just allowed... She's free roam. So she confronts him in...
He never told her not to leave the room?
He's...
That would have been a lot smarter.
I think it doesn't last forever. It's not like I give you an instruction right now and it lasts for a million years. It's more you can't go against my wishes. So my guess is when she got her magic back, it had been so long since she's interacted with any of them that...
Sure.
Yeah. I don't know. I don't know. Well, because the only thing he was told, the only thing he said is do not leave this house. And earlier he told her to sit and listen to him. But he never told her stay within the confines of your cell. Never said that explicitly.
Okay.
And she even comments on that. She said, he told me I can't do this, but he didn't tell me I can't fuck shit up and try and make me leave. So he actually gives her her gear back because he doesn't really have a choice. And so she actually punches him in the face, and he's expecting Butler to like get in the way, but Butler's not there. He's elsewhere in the house doing other stuff. And so he's actually so shocked by it that he doesn't know what to do. And he's standing there in silence, which is unusual for Artemis. He always has a plan. The only thing that breaks his silence is that their door just implodes completely, shattering into 1,000 little pieces.
Okay.
So the reason for that is that to get the troll in the house, they put the troll in a box and put the box up against the door. And then they had this mechanism that fires 24 steel rods at 1,000 miles an hour out of these tubes so that each one of them explodes the point of the door within about 15 centimeters of where it hits. So it effectively blows the door literally right off the hinges. So yeah, rather than using a conventional charge or just pushing the doors open, they decided to disintegrate the door completely. It's gone. There's no
crazy.
front door left. So the new commander is not going to go into battle. The new commander is the opposite of the old commander, and he likes to hide at the back of the fray, which I think is another good commentary on the way some people are.
Well, it's hard to lead from the back.
It's really hard to lead from the back. That's a very good point.
Let's see,
That's a very good line.
It's dark.
So Butler's trying to drag Juliet out of the cell that she's sort of captivated by. She wants to stay there because she thinks she's watching WWE. So he drags her out of there, but then they get pinned down in the main lobby because now the troll is between them and the rest of the house. And so the troll comes in and he comments on the troll being very simian-like, being like an ape.
Oh, okay.
So imagine a 400-pound ape.
Right.
But instead of being thick like a gorilla, imagine long like an orangutan, but bipedal, not like, orangutans usually sit or swing.
Right.
And it also has those tusks, which are serrated. So it comes in, and there's basically nothing that he can do. So he tries to shoot it, and he does. He shoots it twice in the chest, but it's kind of irrelevant. Same way a gorilla. You could shoot a gorilla a couple times, and it wouldn't go down. And so it grabs him. It slashes open his Kevlar vest with its serrated tusks. And on its tusks, it has a biotoxin that makes you feel giddy and makes you not feel the pain.
Whoa.
So he doesn't even feel like he wants to fight it anymore. And then it hurls him over its head against a wall, crushing a bunch of his bones. And he just lands on the ground in this just pile of meat.
Jeez.
It's very vicious. So Holly then tries to intervene, trying to save the girl, trying to save Juliet. So she does a flying kick, like a 2-footed flying drop kick to the back of the troll.
Like a Lee Sin kick?
Yeah, essentially, but with both feet. She almost breaks her legs because even though the suit is designed like the way the Iron Man suit is, where it supports you, she still felt both of her knees popping from the impact of it.
Jeez.
Yeah. She said the impact was a few G's of force. So she kicks this thing hard in the head, And then she's trying to turn the lights on, the same trick she did before, but the lights aren't working because Artemis screwed around with all of her gear when he gave it to Butler. So she tries to headbutt it, which is useless.
Yeah.
Imagine a fly trying to headbutt you.
Yeah.
And that jimmies the wires in place so that the light goes off and blinds it. So they're just hanging on second by second by second. And Holly is then tossed against the same wall that Butler is on. And while she's trying to heal herself, she grabs his hand, and the healing starts to leave her body and go to his.
Oh.
So she actually heals Butler essentially to full.
Why?
Because she knows Butler, well, she wants to save Juliet. That's ultimately what she wants to do. And she knows that Butler has a better chance than she does.
Why does she want to save Juliet?
Because she doesn't want innocents to die.
Oh, okay.
Because she knows Juliet doesn't really have anything to do with any of this.
Right.
And even later on, she tries to plead for Juliet's life, even remarking on how Artemis and Butler have made their bed, but that she didn't get a choice.
Okay.
So she heals Butler, and it was actually kind of cool the way Butler got healed because it describes each individual component, like what it felt like when his spinal discs slid back into place and what it felt like when the blood was suddenly returned to his body.
Jeez.
Because he lost 3 liters of blood, but the magic just returned it all at once. So suddenly his energy levels just went spiking, right? So Butler is now fully up, and Root and Foley just barely managed to get the camera on Holly's helmet working again because Artemis had screwed with it so much, just in time to see what was about to happen next. This is one of my favorite parts of the book. So Butler straps on this medieval set of armor, a literal medieval set of armor, and he has a mace. So he comes up behind the troll, he smacks it in the back, like right between the shoulder blades. It gets pissed off and it turns around. It tries to swing at him, but he ducks underneath and then uppercuts it with the mace. Yeah, just bashes him. And then he shoots it 10 times in the forehead, but none of them penetrate because it has such a thick skull, but it's essentially like getting blasted with a sledgehammer. And then he smashes it in the leg, taking its tendons out so that it falls to the ground. Then at that point, he gets rid of the mace and just starts beating the crap out of it with, because his hands have gauntlets on them, right? Steel gauntlets. So he actually beats the troll to the point where it's not moving anymore, and it's completely out of the situation.
So Butler's a monster.
Butler is awesome. I don't know how big he is, but I know that the troll is a 400-pound creature.
He's
so
yoked is what he is.
Oh, he's pretty jacked. And there's a line where Artemis says, he took this moment to truly appreciate what the Butlers did for the Fowl family. And that was the best part of the book, because everyone is just in total dismay. So then what he does is he takes the troll, a 400-pound troll, he drags it to the front door, which is not there anymore, and kicks it out the front door onto the steps. Like, here, take your shit.
Is this your shit?
Yeah, exactly. Artemis then gets on with the commander and says, as you can tell, there was no cry for help, so now we'll move forward with negotiations.
Holy shit.
Yeah, he's still steadfast. And he says, you have 30 minutes to send in the gold or Holly dies in the bomb, because there's only 30 minutes left in the time field at this point. And that's the rule. As soon as the time stop ends, they bomb, no matter what. That's the rule, because you cannot have the Mudmen winning. That's what they call people.
The Mudmen?
The Mudmen, that's what they call them.
It's actually pretty fair. We lived in the mud for a long time.
Yeah, exactly. And they even point that out. They say, even though they don't live in the mud anymore, they're still the same as they always were. Yeah. So he's hoping that they're going to fall for his little trick. He's hoping that they're going to be just as gullible as he wants them to be. So sure enough, they believe it because they still think they'll be able to bomb him and go in and get the gold. So they send in the gold that he asked for, a ton of 24-karat gold.
Ooh.
Which is a lot of gold, $30 million supposedly at the time of this book. So then, so Artemis asks Holly whether or not it's true that you can make a wish if you catch a leprechaun. And he makes a deal with her. So he sends her out with half of the gold in exchange for one wish, hoping that she will be true to her word and actually come through on that wish. So Root then tries to follow through with the rest of the plan, sending in the biobomb, which is pretty badass. It uses a material that is radioactive but has a half-life of 14 seconds. So it dissipates in about a minute.
Whoa.
And that's why it's so effective. And it sounded really cool the way they describe it too. It's essentially like, imagine someone sent a white and silver firework, one of those fountain ones.
Yeah.
It's kind of like that, but it fills the entire area, the whole manor.
Whoa.
So then Retrieval goes in to get the gold, and Holly goes with them. Holly crosses the threshold of the house, and she's perfectly fine. But then when the others try to go into the house, they start vomiting and everything, because their invitations aren't there. Artemis isn't actually dead.
Right.
Whereas Holly still has her existing invitation from the last time, when she was a prisoner.
So she was actually never intended... She was actually intended to be part of the plan, but he convinced her she was a captive so that her focus was always on something other than
So her focus, was
what
drawn
his plan
away.
was.
Exactly. So she goes through the house and confirms that there are no dead bodies, which means that they must have lived somehow. And the rule is written in the fairy book, if a mudman successfully steals the fairy gold, it's theirs.
Really?
They're not allowed to go back after him.
What?
It's their money.
Why?
I think the idea is to prevent war.
Oh, okay.
Really.
Yeah,
So,
that's actually
and
not
that's
bad.
why they always biobomb at the end of a time stop. Because
Because that's not illegal.
as soon as the time stop ends, that gold is theirs, right? So at this point, Mulch is leaving the situation, and he smells gold because now they've brought in literally a ton of gold. So he realizes that the gold is more or less undefended while everyone is up at the house trying to figure out if Artemis is dead or not. So he comes up behind the remaining half of the gold that got sent out and just snags like 24 bars and just shoves them in his hole, and now he's both free and rich.
You did that thing where you like Andy Dufresne, where you like attaches it to his boot by a bag and like times his chomps to the lightning.
Well, he actually had to take multiple trips to get the gold out of there, and he was worried that in that time he might be caught, but it would be worth it because that gold is worth so much.
Yeah.
And his plan was to live in some sort of really dense human city and pretend to be just a short person. That's how he was gonna live for a while. Just live above ground.
Yeah, and people would laugh and be like, dwarf, and he'd be like,
Yeah.
do call me that. Don't call me that. Damn it.
So you find out that the reason they survived, Artemis, Butler, and Juliet, is because as soon as they sent the gold out with Holly, they went in the other room and Artemis gave both of them a glass of champagne to drink, all of which were laced with sedative. So all of them passed out and immediately left the time field. So they were gone from the time field before the bomb ever went off.
Whoa.
They took the same sedative that Angeline did, knowing that it allowed her to escape.
So they're in the same space but a different time.
Exactly. So the bomb went off at 3 a.m, but they were actually there at 8 o'clock or whatever, because it's an 8-hour time freeze. So they're probably there like 11.
Whoa.
Yeah. So they survive, and the world is normal again. And this is when Butler really confronts him because he was in the dark for so long, and he was never told he was going to be drugged and all these things. But ultimately, he still trusts Artemis because they were successful and they got away with $15 million worth of gold. So something must have worked out.
Yeah.
And now that the sun is up, they win. They get it. It's theirs. Yeah. So Artemis finds out that Holly actually did grant him the wish that he wished for, and she uses her healing to heal his mom.
Oh.
So that Angeline Fowl returns to the woman that she used to be.
Crazy.
Which is also bittersweet in a way, because now he has a mom again, but he can't carry out all these dastardly plots when he has his mom there watching him.
Yeah, we all have time.
And she comes down and she says, "What the hell happened to the door?" And he says, "Oh, we had to have it removed. It was filled with damp." Just some bullshit. He's just happy to see his mom.
What time period did this take place in? Damp.
They're also in Europe somewhere, right?
filled with damp.
It's filled with damp. Then there's a little epilogue, and Artemis is speaking with a therapist and just wrecking him. Not even a competition. He's just making him look like an absurd fool. Because Artemis is way smarter than most adults, and most therapists are assuming that he's got some very ordinary child problems.
Yeah.
And then he gets a phone call halfway through, and he
takes it.
Totally ignores the therapist. And Butler tells him that he's heard about the Fowl Star, which is the boat his father died on. Butler has apparently had a sighting of it. So he basically just tells the therapist, all right, bye, and just leaves. Off to his next adventure.
End credits.
Scene. Yeah. So that's Artemis Fowl.
Didn't Dad read this to us?
You know what? Maybe that's why you know it, because I know you didn't read it.
No, I know someone read it aloud to me, and I'm pretty sure it was Dad.
Probably, yeah. Maybe that's where it all started.
But you were reading it, and then you said, do you guys want to read it together?
Okay. And there's 4 books, as far as I know, in this series. Artemis Fowl, The Arctic Files, Eternity Code, and Opal Deception. I doubt I will read any of the other ones for the discussions. However, it is a great series, and it's really endearing. And I think that the subsequent books, not that I'm certain of it, but I'm pretty sure subsequent books become a lot more mature. Because this one has a lot of the, her uncle was Cupid, and this is why the butlers are called this, and this is where the word fowl comes from. It has a lot of that kind of fluffy crap in it, where when you go forward, even though that fluffy crap is still there, I feel like it's supported more by an actual plot line. Whereas this one, the plot is really basic. Artemis discovers fairies, he steals their book, he kidnaps Holly, he ransoms her for gold, and successfully gets the gold.
The plot is really nice and solid.
It is, yeah. It's a classic. This is not a hero's journey. I guess he's an anti-hero, in a way.
It's not at all a hero's journey.
Yeah, no, it's not at all a hero's journey.
Like the hero's journey has it's like an official 8 steps that it has to be part of. Okay,
and it's not even close to that.
I didn't know that until recently.
Because Artemis doesn't have to overcome anything. He's the shit at the beginning of the story, and at the end, he's still the shit.
Well, and the hero's journey always has the unexpected repercussions of what they believed they wanted as well. That's like a very important piece of it.
Yeah, and there's a bit of that, but not really.
Not even close.
I find that it's just a very unique story.
Yeah.
And I was actually considering not doing it when I finished reading the book.
Oh.
Because I didn't know. It seems so childish compared to all the other books we've done. I know we did the Lorax.
This is one of my favorite plots.
Really?
Yeah, because I had no idea where the story was going in I Have No Mouth.
Oh, yeah.
I had no idea where 1984 was going. Yeah. I enjoyed how this one was all centered around essentially one event. You had the prologue where he steals the book and figures out what his plan is, and then the entire bulk of the story takes place within the house or around the house, and I know where this is going. I understand the direction that the climax will happen, so it was easier for me to understand because I require visuals, I guess.
Yeah, you're not good
It's very hard for me to imagine what these characters look and sound like and feel like in a room. To me, it's like names that just keep getting moved around different pieces of the board, and I have no idea what the space looks like. It's
like when someone starts telling you about a video game you've never played.
Right.
You just tune out, or someone tells you about a TV show you don't watch.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's also hard because when I think of Root, you think of the word Root and Ron Perlman.
Right.
Because I told you that.
I actually didn't.
No?
I don't know. Oh, okay. I don't think I didn't imagine anything after that.
Yeah, and that's the problem is because there's so many scenes. This book is very descriptive, and there's a lot of little things that happen. Like I didn't even talk about the whole animosity between Root and Foley because Root is a very classic commander style. He wants quick answers. He wants everything to be simple. Foley is a techie person who wants... I don't think he knows what he wants, but he wants to be a smartass a lot of the time. So there's all these little interactions in the book that I can't possibly bring to this format. I would advise anyone to read Artemis Fowl because it really is for all ages. Kids can read it, adults can read it, everyone's going to enjoy it. As an adult, you're going to find some cheese. You're definitely going to see some sections that you're just going to go, really? But once you get through those sections and he gets all of his gold and shit, it's cool. It's cool.
It's kind of like Italian Job, except he's a bad guy.
Yeah.
Like they take shit and they make things look like they're not things, and there's holes in the ground. It's all very similar.
Yeah, it's the same. Basically the same. Well, ladies and gentlemen, thank you for joining us in this discussion of Artemis Fowl.
Yeah.
Please join us next time for our discussion of Shrek.
What?
Yes. 2001 or
and
5
then I saw
or
her
something.
face. Hey, this was a podcast. Not a trace. Is archived on YouTube.
Archived, is that what we're calling it now?
That's
kind of an archive.
sure.
Either way, thank you for joining us, and please join us next time.